All right, ready to dive in? You guys really came through with the long COVID material. Wow. Medical journals, personal stories, treatments. Looks like we're covering it all.
And it's smart to be thorough because long COVID, let me tell you, it's complicated. But that's what these deep dives are for, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cutting through the noise, separating the hard facts from the speculation.
Exactly. And one thing that really jumped out, at least for me, was this brain fog thing. It's more than just feeling a little tired, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's a real and often very scary symptom. Think of it this way. Imagine your brain, but instead of firing on all cylinders, it's sputtering, like it's running low on fuel. That's what cerebral hypometabolism is, essentially.
Okay, so like a car running on fumes.
Exactly. And we're not just talking about subjective feelings here. Studies show actual measurable changes. Reduced blood flow, less activity in important brain areas, especially the frontal lobe, which, by the way, is basically your brain's command center for, planning, thinking clearly, making decisions.
No wonder people feel so out of it.
Right. And a major culprit we're seeing again and again is, you guessed it, inflammation. Inflammation is tricky. It's your body's way of fighting off threats, which is good, but sometimes it's like the cleanup crew goes a little overboard.
You're right. Like they're trashing the place after the party's over.
That's a great way to put it. And with long COVID, that inflammation can linger, causing all sorts of havoc. Lungs, heart, and, the brain too.
So that brain fog is literally like your brain is inflamed, it can't work properly.
It's one of the leading theories, yeah. And it makes a lot of sense when you think about it. If your brain is inflamed, starved for energy, it's going to struggle to do its job. Thinking, focusing, remembering, it all becomes much harder. Like trying to run a marathon in those, what are they called?
Lead shoes.
Yeah, lead shoes. And, reading some of those patient stories you sent over, it's heartbreaking how debilitating this can be.
It is. One person described the fatigue as frightening, like their whole life had changed. This isn't just being tired after a long day.
Exactly. And the thing is, it's not just in their heads, so to speak. We're seeing that long COVID can be what we call multi-systemic, impacting all sorts of systems throughout the body.
Right. The materials you sent over mention the heart, lungs, even the gut. All of those can be infected.
Unfortunately, yes.
It's kind of scary if you really think about it. That long COVID can do so much damage beyond, like, your lungs and breathing.
It really is. Imagine your body's like, those maps of air travel, right? With all the lines connecting cities.
Yeah.
Your body's kind of like that. Everything's connected in this big, complex system. So when one part's disrupted, those effects can, ripple outward. And that's what makes long COVID so tricky. Heart, lungs, gut, they can all be affected, and often in ways we're still trying to fully understand.
So we've got the inflammation, the potential for all these different systems to be involved. Was there anything in the research that kind of tied it all together? I noticed dopamine kept popping up, and I'm curious about that.
Ah, yes. Dopamine. The brain's very own feel-good molecule, you could say. It's a big part of our reward system. So like, you accomplish a goal, you get that little dopamine hit, right? Mm-hmm. Feels good, keeps you motivated. Same thing when you're looking forward to something enjoyable.
Yeah.
But with long COVID, and this is where things get interesting, remember how we were talking about inflammation? Mm-hmm. Well, that inflammation, it can actually interfere with dopamine production in the brain.
No kidding.
It's wild, right? Imagine if your brain's reward system is basically on mute. Suddenly, even simple tasks feel way harder, and you don't get that same sense of accomplishment, even when you push through.
Wow. So it's like, on top of all the other symptoms, long COVID can even mess with your motivation.
Exactly. It's like having the rug pulled out from under you.
Yeah.
And I think that really comes through in those patient stories you shared. That deep, relentless fatigue, the lack of motivation.
Yeah, it's definitely more than just being tired. Like that one person said, the fatigue is frightening. My life has changed dramatically. Heavy stuff.
Absolutely. And for a long time, a lot of people just weren't being heard, because from the outside, fatigue just sounds like, I need a nap. But this is different.
It is different. And I think that's why understanding the science behind it, the dopamine connection, all of it is so important.
100%. The more we understand what's going on at a fundamental level, the better equipped we are to help people.
Makes sense. So speaking of helping people, let's talk about treatments. We've covered a lot of ground here, but the big question is, what can actually be done about long COVID? You sent over some research on potential therapies. What's the latest? So treatments, we've talked about the science, the impact on people's lives, but what can actually be done? What's the latest on the treatment front? You sent over some promising research.
It's a hot area of research for sure. And the good news is There are a lot of avenues being explored, some familiar meds, repurposed for long COVID, and then some brand new therapies in the works.
Okay, that's good to hear. One that really piqued my interest was metformin. Isn't that usually for diabetes?
It is, yeah.
Hmm.
But remember when we were talking about inflammation being a major player in long COVID?
Yeah.
Well, one of metformin's kind of hidden talents is its anti-inflammatory effect. It's like, it helps calm down that overactive immune response.
Oh, I see. So it's not treating the diabetes directly, it's addressing that underlying inflammation we've been discussing.
Exactly. And there was that large study, I think it was in the materials you sent, where they gave metformin to people soon after they were diagnosed with COVID. And the folks who got the metformin, they were significantly less likely to develop long COVID down the line.
Wow, that's amazing. So promising.
It is promising. Of course, more research is always needed. Got to see if those results hold up over time, figure out the best dosages. But it's definitely a step in the right direction.
For sure. Anything else looking hopeful?
Definitely. Aside from medications, there's a lot of interest in things like specialized rehab programs, exercise tailored for long COVID recovery, even diet playing a role.
So a whole bunch of different angles to tackle this thing.
Exactly. And what's really cool is that a lot of these approaches are about supporting the body's natural healing abilities, not just masking the symptoms, but really getting at the root of the problem.
Love that. So for someone listening, maybe struggling with long COVID themselves, or they know someone who is, what's the most important thing to take away from all this?
Don't give up hope. Seriously. We've learned so much about long COVID in such a short time, and researchers are making real progress. Stay informed, stay curious, and advocate for yourself. Or for your loved ones who are going through it.
Couldn't agree more. And, it's funny, this whole deep dive got me thinking. The article mentioned that long COVID research, it might actually help us understand other conditions better too, right? Like chronic fatigue syndrome.
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot of overlap in the symptoms, even in the potential underlying mechanisms. What we're learning here, it could have huge implications for those often misunderstood illnesses.
It's like this deep dive. It's not just about long COVID. It's about all these interconnected aspects of health and, the amazing potential of research to change lives.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
Every answer leads to more questions, and that's what keeps things exciting.
That's the truth. Well, on that note of hope and possibility, I think we'll wrap up this deep dive. Huge thanks to everyone listening. Keep asking questions, stay curious, and most importantly, take care of yourselves.